Hey, welcome to the channel. It's Jack with Stronghold Strength and Conditioning. And today we're going to be talking about how to deadlift conventionally without hurting your lower back. But before we get into it, make sure you take a moment and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future content like this. Every Thursday I'm putting out videos showing you how to resolve aches and pains, prevent injuries, and overall optimize your performance inside the gym and outside of it in your daily life and routine. And it doesn't get much better than that. So take advantage of it. Ready? Let's go ahead and dive into this one. All right, like I said, today we're gonna be looking at how to conventionally deadlift without hurting your lower back. And essentially what we wanna be doing here is assessing 3 different phases of the deadlift where this is likely to occur and why it's likely to occur. So we're gonna be looking at your setup, we're gonna be looking at the pull itself, okay? And then we're gonna be also looking at your lockout and your finishing position in that lift. And if you get those 3 right, you'll be able to protect yourself well for your deadlift, making sure that you're not injuring yourself in that lower back lumbar region. Ready? All right. So when we're setting up for our deadlift, we wanna make sure that we start from the ground up and really establish a good base. With the conventional deadlift, your feet are gonna be set parallel to one another with about a 0 to 30 degree turnout on your footing with that. Ideally, if you could get them parallel, that is going to be our best setup so that we can use the design of our leg to actually create the most stability through the system of our leg. So that is going to be external rotation from our hip that allows us to create torque and torsion through the floor, which is our stability. So that rotational force. So when I set my feet, I want to be about hips distance to shoulder distance apart with that parallel stance. And I'm making a tripod foot just as I would with a squat. There's gonna be a lot of similarities in setting up the base structure because of that. So tripod foot, first metatarsal, fifth metatarsal, heel, and then I'm gonna externally rotate my hips so that I can feel stability from my pelvis to begin with here. And you'll notice that my setup, this is a top-down setup here. My setup, I'm not even reaching for the bar yet, okay? So the very first thing I wanna be able to do from the top-down setup is establish stability in my legs through that base. So hips distance, tripod foot, externally rotate. I feel my butt flexing and stabilizing my pelvis. I add in my abdominal flex, and then I get my shoulders in a good position so I have nice alignment through my spinal column and good organization there and stability. Once I have that, I'm gonna send my hips back. And my goal in sending my hips back is loading my posterior chain before I'm ever performing this lift here, okay? So as I send the hips back, I wanna see if I can keep that external rotation and minimize my knee bend as I'm reaching for the bar. Now, similarly, when I grip the bar here, I wanna be just wider than shoulder width apart on my grip, if not shoulder width itself. So it's right around shoulder width, maybe just wider than that. And I'm feeling my hamstrings loaded to begin with here. Now, if you have less mobility through your posterior chain, and when you go to reach here, you get to a certain point without being able to reach the bar and you have to bend, at that point, we'll know right there if you need to do a bottoms up setup. So these are 2 different options on your setup, okay? So top down, if you have the mobility through the posterior chain that allows you to get to the bar and touch the bar without compensating at your lumbar spine to get there, or bottoms up if we need to. So I'm gonna finish our setup from the top down and then I will go into the bottoms up here. So get the grip on the bar, shoulder width apart. I want to over grip. So I'm actually reaching so my knuckles curl under to some degree here, and then getting my shoulder blades down and back. Now at this point, I can soften my knees, and I'm looking to add that soft bend at the knees to keep the posterior chain loaded and to go with a vertical shin. So I don't want my knees to shoot forward over my midfoot or even toward the toes really, I have a vertical shin at that point. If you were to look from the side here, you can see this is the same setup, pretty straight line from my knee to my ankle. That's what we want. Okay, so I hinge, externally rotated, keeping the legs soft when I grip the bar, about shoulder width on my grip. Roll the shoulder blades down and back, and we're gonna sink the abdomen between the inner thigh there so that my lumbar spine stays flat. My abs are engaged. I have that external rotation. There's a lot of tension built up yet. I'm going to externally rotate my shoulder so my elbows lock in. And then from there, I just want to take tension into the bar so I'm already clicking it into place. Once I have that set, that is my top-down setup with a relatively neutral spine ready to pull from that position. Okay, all I have to do from there is take my breath, fill my abdomen with intra-abdominal pressure, and move into the actual lift phase. Bottoms up setup. Okay, from the bottom, if you need to, you can start with more of a squat. Okay, this allows me to maintain that neutral spinal column, keep it organized and stabilize it, get my grip, and then pull myself back into the tension of my posterior chain. So the footing is the same, parallel 0 to 30 degree turnout, hip external rotation, that's my knees driving wide. My torso is a little more vertical. Okay, I'm allowing myself to squat into it, but then I'm gonna pull my butt back out of that squat position, and that loads my hamstrings and posterior chain. Okay, so very slight difference, top down to bottoms up, but based off of where your mobility is, you may need to use one or the other in that. All right, next, let's look at some of the movement errors that are causing low back pain in your deadlift. And the very first one that we'll touch on is making sure that, first of all, that your hinge pattern is truly a hinge pattern and not a squat pattern. A lot of times when we're getting the movement wrong, we're squatting our deadlift and getting a vertical torso, which completely takes it out of our posterior chain. Our posterior chain is a very powerful set of muscles, and if we do not use them properly, we're going to pay the price of that. So we want to make sure that we're actually loading that posterior chain, which is why we went through the setup, and we keep that tension and that focus on the extension of the hips through the lift, okay, which is a big driver of that hinge, the movement coming from the hips back and forward. That simple movement right there is what you need to know, and that's mostly what we're relying on, not the quadriceps in this lift. So if you're first of all squatting it, you got to stop that, get the setup right, and focus on what's happening at the hamstrings, the glutes, and the upper back musculature through that lift. Now, the next mistake is obviously any rounding of the back through the pull itself. And it's very important to understand, first of all, that the deadlift is a push-pull movement. So we are pushing from our legs while we pull from the upper body at the same time. Generally, when we have rounding of the spinal column, it is instability around the spinal column itself. So we're not able to truly just stabilize the spinal column through the movement, and we're losing that stability as we pull. So when we round, it's generally the fact that our tension through our core has been lost, and we're losing the connection of that push and pull occurring at the same time. They're becoming separate pieces of the deadlift. And at that point, the tension becomes right there at my lumbar spine where it's breaking. Okay, so we're segmenting the spine, which is the problem itself, because now I've lost that whole lever of making my organized spine very stable and keeping that. Part of that is your shoulder and the ability to actually retract, depress, and then externally rotate for stability, with your grip being in your smallest fingers. So really emphasizing rotation through the bar that makes that more stable. So as that setup had external rotation at the hip, similarly external rotate at the shoulder there, and then making sure everything pushes and pulls at the same time. So the timing itself is very important. We don't want the hips to rise first. We don't want the shoulders to pull separate and try and pull from the upper back before the legs extend. It's a smooth legs and shoulders together to make the work happen, okay? The last piece that we need to really touch on here is making sure that we are not jerking that bar once again into the lift. So you shouldn't hear a loud click before you're lifting that bar from the ground. That would be like tying your bumper to a tree stump and trying to gun it and pull that tree stump out. It's not gonna turn out well for your bumper on that car, okay? The last piece we wanna touch on is the actual lockout position of the deadlift. When you get to the top position, we want to create a solid pillar that we started with in the top down setup. So it's that same externally rotated hip, glutes are tight, stabilizing the pelvis. You've reached full extension of the hip. There's no reason to go past full extension of the hip at this point and hyperextend into your lumbar spine on purpose. Not what we're going for. Reach the top point, understand what neutral feels like, add in the abdominal squeeze there at the top so that you have a pillar that you're creating, and lock out with the shoulders over the hips, over the ankle, and a nice straight line. So we don't overextend the bar and drive in. We stop at neutral and maintain the external rotation. Lead with the hips back down, and then finish with that same soft knee bend. If you can get those three together, you're going to have a good deadlift that is not going to hurt your low back. All right, and there you have it. The 3 different phases that you need to master in your deadlift to ensure that you're not going to hurt your low back when you are lifting that weight. The setup, the push-pull phase, and the lockout at the top. If you get each of those 3 right, you're going to do it with good execution, protect your spine, and actually become stronger through that posterior chain so that you don't have to worry about back injuries down the road. If you like this video, make sure you let me know by clicking that big thumbs up down below, and take a moment to share this one with your deadlifting friend. Make sure that they get this information as well, especially if they struggle with feeling a sore back after they deadlift or anything along the likes of that. If you are somebody who struggles with training aches and injuries and you want to improve your mobility over the next 90 days, what I want you to do is drop right now down below in the description and fill out the coaching application. What I'll do is get in contact with you and we'll get you moving in the right direction so that you can be training pain-free and stiffness-free and moving without that high risk of injury when you are training. So down in the description, fill that out and we'll get in touch with you. Last but not least, if you have not already, make sure you take a moment and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future content like this. Every Thursday, I'm putting out videos showing you how to resolve aches and pains, prevent injuries, and overall optimize your performance inside the gym and outside of it in your daily life and routine. Welcome to the Stronghold Army. I'll see you next week.